The egoic virus of the cancel culture. Hi, I'm Ann Margaret with this week's Sacred Sunday message to raise the vibration of your body, mind, and spirit. So, after last week's exploration of cancel culture, this week's Sacred Sunday message reveals the egoic virus that creates the dysfunctional pattern of canceling. And we'll look at the symptoms, the causes, the remedies for this desire to cancel others in our own families, in the workplace, and also on social media. And then I'll share with you about this way that this dysfunctional root and how it relates to the third chakra, and all related to our junior high school days. So let's go back there. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's Sacred Sunday message is also dedicated to the people of Lebanon. So I'll share with you a little wisdom from my favorite Lebanese poet at the end. All right, so let's get started. Virus. Okay, so this idea of a virus. Why did I use this word? For obvious reasons. A virus is always in us. So our ego is always in us. These temptations or these traps are always in us. But they can have flare-ups, right? Viruses can have flare-ups. And ego is the same way. We can develop antibodies and strengthen our immunity, or we can let it consume us. And obviously we don't want that. So we don't learn anything in this life by pointing the finger at others. So why watch this video if you're looking for affirmation that it's the other guy's fault, right? So how you engage has everything to say about you, how you engage with others, whether it's online or whether it's in person or with your family. So if we're on a true path of growth and transformation, there's always room for growth, for deeper understanding and a more compassionate heart. So we must, in order to do that, we must be open to considering another way of seeing things. And this is all related to the third chakra. So I'll get into that today too. So what I want you to ask yourself first is, are you dismissing an entire human, whether it be in your family, online, a stranger, whomever it is, and all they've done and been in the world because their viewpoint is different from yours? And I don't mean to oversimplify by saying that, but because they might go about things the wrong way according to you, not love you in the right way, not be the right mother, sister, daughter, friend, whatever that the identifying label is for you. If we do this, this will only leaving us backing ourselves up into a corner, imprisoned by our own intolerance of others. So let's look at this. So the types of canceling, we talked a lot about this last talk, so go ahead and check out that last talk. Are you a part of the cancel culture? Cancer, I guess that wasn't too much of a slip of the tongue. But we have collective canceling, we've got individual canceling, personally, professionally. We do it in our families. We stop listening to each other, so that war starts in the home. And we also do it socially. We do it through public shaming, through verbal violence, through social media, etc. So I want you to personalize today's talk. Think of somebody that you've either canceled in your life, you stopped talking to, you stopped listening to, you've just kind of put in a box and discarded. This is going to help with that person, I promise you. So let's look first at the symptoms of the egoic virus. So first of all, what emotions are you sensing? Checking in with your emotions. Are you angry? Are you taking cheap shots? Are you just over it and past it and just kind of like buried it underneath of the rug and moved on, but not really dealt with it? What are your justifications? Like, how are you justifying this rejection of them? Are you gossiping about them? Are you shaming them publicly? What are the justifications you have? Oh, they don't know what they're talking about, or they've always been this way, so why should I even listen to them? Or, oh, they said this, or they're addressing that, or they're considering this or that. What are those justifications? Next question to ask yourself, what is your motivation? What's your motivation? Are you really up for a conversation online or with them in person, or are you simply there to shut it down? Are you trying to win? These are all great questions to ask ourselves. Lastly, what are your judgments? Have you labeled someone in a certain way? Have you labeled them as crazy? If you've labeled them as this or that, some label left or right in the political field, or crazy conspiracy theorist or overly conservative or overly liberal or whatever it is, it means you're no longer listening. If you have applied a label to them, you are no longer listening. Are you dismissing their talking points outrightly without even considering them? Okay, so let's talk about why this exists. Those are the symptoms of the egoic virus, and that's how you can tell if you've got it, if it's flaring up. So why does this exist? Let's look at the psychology of canceling. So there are two paths: the path of the soul, that recognizes wisdom and God and love and value in all human beings, and then the egoic path, which is a separateness, identification, the addiction to being right, to seeing people as less than, greater than, etc. This sense of polarity or divisiveness. And the ego is not bad. We'll talk about that in a second. But before I go into the causes and the remedies, let's look at the third chakra. This is the third chakra, right in the center of the solar plexus. And it develops from the time we're about 8 to 12 years old, which is why I brought up junior high school days. So if you think about that time, our ego versus the soul, 8 to 12, this is when we have our labels. This is when we get labeled as the nerd, the jock, the artsy one, the difficult one, the outcast. And because of those labels, we start identifying ourselves and others, and we stop really listening, really seeing them, all right? And we also have this addiction to being right. So if we're like, I'm right about you being wrong, I'm right about being this way, I'm right about myself always being wrong, this addiction to being right also lays in this third chakra. So let's talk about oneness and separateness, because this is also in the center of Manipura. So dysfunctional and impractical teachings of a very new agey spiritual approach actually denounces this idea of separateness rather than embracing the ego or the healthy attributes of the ego. So the ego is not the enemy. The soul is not the glorification of our experience of being human. They need to come together. So rather than embracing our separateness and celebrating that separateness, our own and others, we usually denounce it in some way. So this requires us to accept ourselves and really have a tremendous amount of faith that everything is unfolding as it needs to unfold. But it's an overblown ego, that virus flaring up, that asserts its will on others, telling them that they should be this way or they should be that way or they shouldn't be this way or that way. So especially for someone who isn't seeking your advice, you might not want to offer it, all right? They have their own way of seeing things and you have yours. So let's talk about the causes now of this egoic virus. It's all about resistance. We know that all suffering comes from resistance. So let's look at this resistance in this way. Are we resisting opposition? Are we over-identifying with our point of view, with our labels, with our tribe, with our political party, with our winning team? Okay, are we over-identifying? This is who I am, this is what I believe, and this is the truth, rather than staying open and considering all possibilities. So we have a need there for affirmation. If we're resisting the opposition, we just want everybody who's surrounding us to be like-minded. Yes, this is important. This is important when we're crawling in our spiritual journey. But when we begin to walk and we begin to run, then to surround ourselves also with people who have different mindsets helps us to grow, helps us to evolve. So we only grow in the face of opposition. We don't grow by surrounding ourselves just with everybody who thinks like us. So when someone disagrees, we can have a pattern that's dismissive. So the downside of this is closed-mindedness, and there's something that we're missing out by not considering others, okay? The archetype here is that archetype of the killer. We just want to destroy what we don't see as worthy of life or opinions, all right? And so we want to question here, we want to say, why do I feel threatened? All right, that's a great question to ask. So another thing we're resisting is resisting our own separateness. One of our greatest fears is separateness, is being separate from each other and having different viewpoints. So this also forces us to have a personal accountability, a responsibility for taking ownership for how our lives are showing up. So the pattern here is we want just this collective entity to exist that helps us feel safe. But what this forfeits is our own critical thinking as our own savior of them. We'll get into that. But the savior archetype here is wanting other people to do our thinking for us. Just saying, oh, I'm of this tribe, so I'm going to agree with that, or that's what I adopt as my way of thinking. And we rely on someone else to save us or to think for us. The question to ask ourselves here is, am I taking responsibility for seeing the whole picture? Not just my side, not just my tribe's way of thinking. Now, the last resistance we have is our resistance to oneness, to this soul connection to everyone, to respect that we only have a piece of this whole puzzle, all right? Only us and our tribe only has a piece of the whole puzzle. So can we recognize that this person that we're disagreeing with is human? They have their own unique perspectives. We have no idea what it's like to be in their shoes, and they don't know what it's like to be in ours either. So this pattern that we have is very tribal. It's a failure to recognize God in another. And we're cruel, we hate, we shame, all right? So this archetype of the judge is very apparent here because we're so quick to judge. We're not listening to others. We're not questioning. We're slow to question really our own way of thinking. So ask yourself, what made you the authority over others? You are the authority over yourself. And have you forgotten that this person has experiences that you've never had before? So seeking to understand, that prayer of St. Francis that's so beautiful, rather than to be understood. So why do we try and silence each other, how they should be, tell them how they should be, disregard their free will? The question to ask ourselves here is, am I honoring the wisdom in others? Am I seeking to understand their perspective? All right, so let's look at the remedies now of this egoic virus. All right, we need to ask ourselves these three questions when we feel these three resistances come up, the resistance to opposition, the resistance to separateness, and the resistance to oneness. And we need to also ask questions like, what is my truth? How did I arrive at this truth? Like, what influences consciously and subconsciously in my life had me arrive at this perspective? Do I know for sure, with absolute certainty, I'd bet my life on it, that this is the truth? All right, usually it is no, we do not know for sure. So we can never stop seeking and questioning and considering things outside of our comfort zones. Why am I clinging to this way of seeing things? That's another great question to ask. Like, why am I so attached that this is the way it is? Am I doing it for safety? Is it too difficult to even consider that I might be wrong? That's a good question. What can I learn from others? Is my judgment covering up a blind spot by pointing the finger? We know when we point the finger at others, we've got three pointing back at us. So when you're judging others, like, this is ridiculous, this is absurd, this is a dangerous way of being, how is that reflecting back a blind spot in me? Okay, we are only in charge of this right here. So we cannot be the thought police for others or the judgment police for others. We must look within ourselves and we'll find that answer that will liberate us. And the last thing is my resistance revealing an inner wound? Like, don't do this because you're hurting me, you're hurting others, or rather than getting at our own wound within us. So collectively, guys, we are moving from this third chakra of ego, of over-identification, of all of these dysfunctions here. They're all wreaking havoc on our lives right now, identifying with this tribe, separating from this tribe. And as we move to that heart center of compassion, of love, of seeking to learn and understand from one another, recognizing that beauty within us all of these third chakra flare-ups are going to be there. So I wanted to finish with a nod to my favorite poet, a Lebanese poet, and my heart goes out to those in Lebanon struggling right now with the aftermath of the explosion from this week. And Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, in that passage of self-knowledge, he says, "Say not, I have found the truth. Say, I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path of the soul." Don't we all do that right now? Say rather, I have found the soul walking upon my path. For the soul walks upon all paths. The soul walks not upon a line, nor does it grow like a reed in a straight line. The soul unfolds itself like a lotus of countless petals. Feel free to share this. Contact me for personal coaching. And until next time, guys, keep raising the vibration. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye-bye.